Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Charlie Nickley. I'm Chief Executive of IAgrE, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us on this lovely sunny spring day for our April presentation. For today's lecture, I'd like to welcome back Paul Harris from Real Success. Paul has done a couple of lectures for us over the years, and he's back today to talk about recruitment and employment law essentials. Paul's previous lectures will be available on our YouTube channel, so if you wish to view them, then please subscribe to the channel. As usual with our lectures, everybody will be muted, and if you'd like to ask questions, please pop them in the chat at the bottom of the screen, and then at the end of the presentation we can unmute you so you can ask in person. Okay, I'll now hand over to Paul.
Thank you, Charlie, and good afternoon, good evening, good morning, whatever time you happen to be watching this, if you're watching the recording. It's a real pleasure to be back here again to talk about my favourite subject, which is people in agriculture and everything around that. But it is, we're going to have a whistle-stop tour, actually, of a number of areas around how we can recruit people more effectively, but once we've got them, how do we retain them, whether that's on a farm, it could be in a supply business, it could be a consultancy business, an engineering firm. The principles are going to be the same. So that's what we're going to talk about in this particular lecture, and there will be time at the end for questions. You good? Great. So recruit smart, retain well. That's the sort of heading I've given for today's lecture. And because both are important, are they not? It isn't just about finding somebody or the right person for our business. It's once we've got them, how do we hold on to them? And why is it that so often some of the best people we've got decide to leave and some of the less people we've got decide to stay? So it's about really how do we focus on finding the right people, and then also once we've got them, how do we also make sure we stay compliant with employment law? There are some changes coming down the line, or proposed changes to employment law. I'll be talking briefly about just the things you've got to be concerned about. Much of what you might be hearing in the press and in the media actually isn't coming or may not come at all. So I will focus today purely on the things that you need to be concerned about. But who are Real Success? Who's Paul Harris? Let's just move that on one slide. So Real Success, you may or may not have heard of us if you're in the agricultural sector. Real Success is my business, although there's about 15 of us now involved in the business. We are what we call a complete wraparound service for agri-businesses in the UK. So we help people to, first of all, find the right members of staff, and we have a particular way of doing that, which is partly based on skills, but very much based on personality and making sure the right person, not just any person, joins your business. How many of us have recruited in haste and regretted it in leisure by recruiting the wrong person who said they could do the job, but they didn't fit into our team? So we do a lot around that. Then once you've got people, this idea of retention or managing people, which is all the stuff around being good leaders, good managers, training people how to do that more effectively through personal reviews and effective conversations and all that sort of area. And then we have what we call the resources section of our business, which is the HR side. So it's employment contracts, company handbooks, making sure that you're on the right side of the law, which is what we're going to touch on briefly today. And the central pivot, if you like, of our business, or the central heart of our business, is we believe that people management and keeping people is all about having effective relationships with them. And the four colours you've got there are because we extensively use a profiling system to make sure that we communicate effectively with the right people in our business. So I'll talk about that a little bit later on. But there you got the 4 R's: recruitment, retention, resources, and relationships. That is Real Success. I'm the founder. We've been going now for 15 years. For those of you that are in the industry, I'm originally from outside of agriculture, fell into agriculture 13 years ago, so 2 years into my business, where I quickly discovered that there weren't many people actually offering any support around people in agriculture. In fact, I believe we are still the single only consultancy business that purely focuses on everything to do with people. Some people do recruitment, some people do a little bit of people management. The only one-stop shop in the industry. So that's perhaps why I've been asked to talk about this today. So let's get into a bit of background first of all. So I've called this slide the state of play. So what are we faced with at the moment in the agri sector in the UK? Now, depending on which part of the sector you're in, you may well be, if you're somebody working on a farm at the moment, really concerned about some of the government policies that are going on, from inheritance tax changes to the withdrawal of SFI. That affects us both as consultants in the industry, but also on farm as well. So that's a pretty unsettling time. And many of the people that I speak to in the industry are feeling very unsettled at the moment and not quite knowing what the future looks like, whether that's from a succession planning perspective, or even now I was planning on doing some environmental work and I can't do that now because I'm not going to get the SFI payments. So I understand there's a lot of sort of unsettlement, if that's the right word, in the industry at the moment. We've also got, certainly if you're looking at the on-farm part of agriculture, there's a worker shortage post-Brexit. It hasn't particularly worked for us, I don't think, from an employment perspective. You may have your own views on whether Brexit was a good idea or not, but certainly a lot of the supply of labour into the agricultural sector in all parts of it, but particularly the on-farm sector, has really been hit because a lot of people are now no longer coming over to the country because it's too expensive or too difficult to employ them, particularly hard for the horticultural sector. So some of the seasonal worker schemes are quite expensive now. There's a lot of hurdles to overcome to bring the right sort of people in. So we have a shortage of people wanting to enter into agriculture. Then we just have the general working harder and longer. That seems to be a cultural thing, particularly in agriculture, that we're all expected to work longer hours, harder, particularly at the moment. We might be thinking about not replacing staff that are leaving, which tends to add more pressure onto those that are still in businesses. Then we've got the whole area of what we call the different generations. And there does seem to be a different perspective now on some of the younger generation in particular coming through. They have a different approach to lifestyle. Health is perhaps more important than wealth to the next generations coming through. And that's affecting how many hours we can expect people to work. And it's changing maybe the dynamics of our working market. And then we've got specific challenges that relate to the agricultural sector, whether that's on the supply side or it's actually on the on-farm side, the long working hours in certain aspects of agriculture, the poor working conditions. There are certain things that are very specific to agriculture, which can make recruitment and retention more challenging. And the last thing to say, and I have to mention this, is that, and I understand completely why the farming media in particular and the agricultural media is trying to reflect the views of its membership right now. But personally, I don't think it's helping us in terms of attracting people into the industry. A lot of the rhetoric that's coming out, not only from farming media, but all the media, is that it's sort of the end of farming as we know it. When Mr. Clarkson, Jeremy Clarkson, says it's the end of farming as we know it, I'm not sure that's particularly helping us to recruit new people into all parts of our sector, whether it's the supply side, engineering, science and technology, or even to work on a farm. If you're being told that the farming industry is not going to exist, the agricultural sector is going to decline, you're less likely to want to come and join. So I don't think that's helping us. Personally, as I begin my state of play, I believe the industry has a very positive future. We have hurdles to overcome. One of the biggest being actually how do we attract people and keep people within our sector? But actually, this industry's been through 2 world wars, it's been through recessions, it will come out the other side of this. And with the right mental attitude towards this, accepting we have to deal with some of the things that have been put in front of us, like inheritance tax, but we will come through that. And actually, we've got to have a positive mindset if we're going to recruit and retain staff in this sector. So let's begin by thinking about, why should somebody work for you, whether you're in the supply side or in the on-farm side? So here I've just got 6 things for you to think about, that just to get your brains thinking about why someone would want to work for you. The first one is, what is your culture? What's your workplace culture? What's it like to be in your business? Is it a positive place to be? Or is everybody constantly fighting, at war with each other, falling out? If you're a family business, what is the family culture like? Are you falling out with your son, your daughter, your mum, your dad, your brother, your uncle, whoever you're working with? That workplace culture is got to be something that people want to be part of. And how do you create that positive workplace culture? It's very important. People are looking to work in positive places. Are you a good leader? If you are leading people, if you're running a business, if you're managing a team, have you got the skill set required to do that? People often think that good leaders are just born. We're not born to be good leaders. Some will have maybe individual traits that make it easier, but all of us have to learn how to be a leader. How many of us in our jobs have taken the time to learn science, technology, get qualified? If we're on a farm, we learn how to look after some livestock or to drive a tractor. Do we learn how to be a good leader? And actually, leadership is all about, it's not about you, it's about the people in your charge. It's not about being in charge, it's about the people in your charge. And one of the challenges about leadership is actually we have to learn to let go and let other people do things. And actually, our job then is to get the best out of the people in our charge. So, how good are you at that? Are you somebody that people would want to work for? What are the working conditions like in your business? If it's a farm situation, we know that the working conditions are often damp, dirty, cold. You know, some farms still don't have a working toilet on their farm for their staff. And if they do, it might well be a toilet without a front door or a lock, and nothing suitable for females. So in that area, we've got a lot of work to do to make our industry be attractive. But what are your working conditions if you are running a supply side business, an engineering business? Is there somewhere good for people to go and have their coffee in the morning? Is there a decent staff room? These are areas that people will look at when they're coming for an interview with you. What does your business stand for? What are your core values of your business? Have you got them articulated? Can you describe them to a candidate coming to work for you? Are you able to say, this is what the mission and vision of my business is? This is what we're about. This is what I call the behavioral protocols. We can often have protocols in our business, but our core values are our behavioral protocols, how we expect people to be when they work for us. Are you clear on that? And can you articulate it to a prospective candidate? Do you know how to communicate effectively? I'll touch on this a bit later as well, but one of the core parts of our business is helping business leaders, business owners, managers to communicate effectively with their staff, either giving feedback effectively, doing a personal review, even interviewing effectively. That is very much predicated on understanding that people are different. Where are you on that barometer? Why should I work for you? Are you a good communicator? Just as a quick case study, a quick example, one of a client that we've worked with, some of you may or may not know Tom and Karen Holton in Cheshire. They run a dairy farm. Karen came from outside the industry. And if I was to measure them against the criteria on the screen here, no business is perfect, and Karen wouldn't in any way say her business is perfect, but they've tried really hard to improve the working conditions. They have a clear set of values, particularly around animal welfare, that are non-negotiable. They have people waiting to work for their business. So when we say, how do we recruit people? There's a shortage of people. Good businesses have waiting lists. And I know that Tom and Karen would fit into that category. So how can we recruit effectively then? What's some of our recruitment strategy? Let's look at some of these again for you to think about. And I do have, by the way, a downloadable template, a downloadable document that summarizes everything we're talking about here in this session. So you'll be able to get that from us later on. So smart recruitment strategies. The first thing is, often we recruit in haste when we're desperate. In other words, somebody has resigned and we need to find somebody. We should always be looking and thinking and talking to people about good people in our industry. That's being proactive, constantly thinking about who's coming next, inviting people to come for an interview, even when you haven't got a job necessarily available, getting people a database of people that you can contact that are interested in working for you. So being proactive is being smart. Being reactive tends to be when, and most of the recruitment you will do will be reactive, but who could you be thinking of in your industry that I'd like them to work for my business? When can you have a phone call with them or drop them an email to say, I'd love to have a chat with you at some point if ever you were thinking of leaving from where you are? That's the first one, being proactive. The second one is using social media, whether we hate it or love it. Most of our recruitment that we now do is via social media. Yes, we have our own website and we use all of the recruitment websites for our recruitment. But actually, what we would say is the best way now to use to get your name out or your jobs out is actually through social media, through Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and other areas. So, and if you don't know how to use social media, Speak to your teenagers, they'll tell you how to use it, or get some advice. We can certainly help you. How many of you are talking to colleges for agricultural students? I did a careers day with Harper Adams, and they were absolutely a whole breadth of people looking for different careers in agriculture. There's some people that wanted to work on farms, some people wanted to become consultants, some wanted to work as a technician, some wanted to be vets. There are lots of people at colleges looking for careers. Are you talking to colleges about what your business can offer potential students? Do you do work placements? Do you allow people to come as interns and work for you for a while to get work experience? Great opportunities to recruit effectively. Do you know how to write a decent job advert? When I see a job advert that begins with, due to being let down, I'm now looking again. People who write adverts in a negative sense. So there are ways to write decent job adverts. Again, we have a particular format that we teach, but you can find, if you look on Facebook again, or Indeed, you'll see examples of good adverts. But maybe that's something to think about, is what do your job adverts actually say? Are they saying enough about the job, enough about the person? And particularly if it's a rural job where you're either working in a rural community or even on a farm, talk positively about the area that you are in, particularly if you're expecting people to move to that area, to move to the farm or to move to the sector. They're interested in what the schools are like, what the local area is like. Don't forget to talk about that in your job advert as well. But here's the most important thing, and here's what we call our SCAR formula. So this is something that we teach a lot. Is often when we're looking at people or analyzing people, we want somebody who can do the job. That's somebody who's got the skills and knowledge. They've got the experience sometimes to physically do the job we want them to do. And actually, but what this formula shows you is the importance of attitude and alignment, and alignment being the multiplier. Let me briefly explain why this is important. So you could have somebody who's got the skills and knowledge. Say we scored them, I don't know, 8 out of 10 for their skills and knowledge, but their attitude was they were a bit miserable. They're a bit unpleasant at times. They're a bit inappropriate in their language, particularly if they're, towards younger people or to different genders. And they're just inappropriate and they're just a bit miserable. But the biggest, and might only score them there for, I don't know, 4 out of 10 of their attitude. The alignment is their willingness to come alongside you when you want to make changes. And actually, we can discover a lot of this at interview stage. While I'm putting it under smart recruitment, it fits into retention as well. But actually, what people believe in, what their attitude is, and whether they are aligned in terms of what you're looking for, you need to know what your values are first. We need people who are more aligned. So what if you do a multiplication, say somebody had an alignment score of 4 out of 10. If we do that maths again, 8 and 8 is 16 plus 4 is 20. Multiply that by 4 gives you a score of 80, a performance potential of 80. Let me tell you about somebody called Jeremy. Okay, he's just come out of university or out of college. His skills and knowledge is not the same as Bob. Okay, Bob's got more skills and knowledge. So we're only going to score him 6 out of 10 for his skills and knowledge. But actually his attitude, Jeremy's attitude is bang on. Really positive, wants to learn, is enthusiastic, is on time every day. Score them 8 out of 10 for that. Fantastic. So there we've got sort of 6 and 6 is 12 and 8 is 20. Same score as Bob. But the alignment score is also 8 out of 10 for Jeremy because he wants to learn. They're keen. They might not have all the experience. They might even be from outside of your industry. But actually, if you do the mathematics, it comes to 160, double the potential. So what I would always say is recruit attitude and alignment and teach skills and knowledge. If we teach skills and knowledge and then the attitude and alignment is good too, we've got almost the perfect employee. But many of us hold on to for the sake of argument, our Bobs that can do the job whilst everybody else around them leaves because their attitude and alignment is poor. So don't be brave enough. Smart recruitment is being brave enough to recruit attitude and alignment, to be prepared to teach the skills and knowledge that you need. I hope that makes sense. Let's look at some of the legal basics that you need to know right at the beginning then when we're taking people on. There's some legal basics and some pitfalls here. 3 absolute basics that you need to know. Everybody who works for you by law should have full written statement and terms and conditions, often known as an employment contract, within 2 months of them starting. We say have it on day 1. It's not that they get a contract after they've passed their probation period or after 6 months, or we'll get round to that at some point. Everybody should have an employment contract who is employed by you, whether they're part-time, full-time, hourly rate or salaried. They must have an employment contract. If you do not have an employment contract in place with that person, you're breaking the law. That's actually breaking the law. Now, there are no necessarily fines for that, but actually when we talk a little bit later on about tribunals, that's why you have an employment contract to specify. Now, employment legislation changes, so contracts need to change. So if you say, yeah, I've got contracts, did them 20 years ago, they're probably out of date now and will not cover current legislation. So one of the first things you need to check is, does everybody have an employment contract? Were they given it on day one? And if so, how old is it? And does it need to be renewed? If it does, again, you can speak to us or your HR providers and we'll look at your employment contracts for you. Other basics are tax status. This is where often, particularly in farming, we get the tax status wrong. There's an employee, an employed person, and there's self-employed. You cannot have somebody who's self-employed working for you and nobody else, who wants to be self-employed because they believe they get a tax break by doing so. The fines for this are huge. Just to be clear to anybody who's running a business, if the tax status of your staff is incorrect, it is your responsibility as the employer to get it right. So if the employee hasn't paid the right levels of national insurance, you as the employer have to pay to HMRC all of those national insurance contributions, plus all the national insurance contributions you should have paid, plus a fine, which can be 5-6 figures at times. So getting the tax status right of your staff is really important. It's a bit of a grey area. It's based around the relationship they have with you, not necessarily whether they bring their own bag of tools or they use their own truck. It's actually the nature of the working relationship that determines. There is a checker on the government website. You also got a checklist on our website you can download as well. But that's something you need to get right because of the implications of fines, and it can be quite eye-watering. And the third one I'm saying of the three basics are the right to work. People say, I say, who do you need to check has got the right to work? And people will say overseas staff. Incorrect. Every single person that works for you, you need to do UK right to work checks, which are just to suggest they have the right to work in this country. It's very simple. It's often a passport check or a driving license check to check their identity, that they're not an illegal immigrant and they have the right to work. But actually, it's the same whether you've been born in this country and you've lived here all your life, you still need to check their right to work. Those are the three key things, the legal basics that you must know if you're running any business in this country. And then just some of the pitfalls that you might need to avoid, which can be tricky at times. The first one is what we call workplace discrimination. From day one, every single person has the right not to be discriminated against, whether that's for colour, gender, sexual orientation, disability. Literally, they have protection of that on day one. So let's just say someone joins your business on day one. Within a week, you discover they're transgender and you don't like that and you fire them for that. They could take you to a tribunal and would win, because that is discrimination under the Discrimination Act, and therefore you would actually lose the tribunal. So everybody has that. You also have it at the interview process as well. Not to be asked, well, are you planning to have children if you're a woman? There are certain questions that we cannot ask at interview because they are discriminatory. So be careful of that. That's a pitfall we can sometimes fall into, thinking that people do not have their full employment terms until 2 years service has been earned. It's not the case. Full employment rights is currently 2 years. The government is proposing to reduce that, possibly to 9 months, but actually, and some of you might have heard in the press, even take it away completely. No, it's going to be discussed. It's still under consultation, but it's still 2 years at the moment for full employment rights. But actually, the employment right I gain on day one is the right not to be discriminated against for whatever reason. Another pitfall we can often fall into is calculating holiday pay. It can be complex, particularly if people are working part-time, they're doing overtime. How much holiday and how much holiday pay do I need to pay people? There is a government calculator. I've put the link on it there. Not you can see the link, but if you go to the government website or just type in government holiday entitlement calculator, you can calculate it based on numbers of hours. And part-time workers are entitled to the same amount of holiday. I'm sure you're all aware the minimum legal requirement for holidays in the UK is 20 days or 4 weeks plus 8 bank holidays, so 28 days holiday. We're all entitled to that, whether you're part-time or full-time. But actually, it does get a little complicated when you're looking at seasonal workers and things like that. So do go to the government website to calculate that to make sure you don't fall into that pitfall. And the last one is health and safety legislation. Again, from day one, everybody has the right to be safe at work. And actually, we cannot ask people because they're junior or their apprentice to climb on the roof, because that's their rites of passage almost. Everybody has the right to being safe at work, and that's one of the key things that you need to be aware of. Right, just gonna check my notes, think make sure I've covered everything there. Yes, I have. Right. So we've talked about the legal basics. We've talked about some common pitfalls. So what happens if it goes wrong? And it does sometimes. And there's some important costs you need to be aware of getting these sort of things wrong. The first one I've already indicated. If we get the tax status of somebody wrong, or their whole employment status is incorrect, or they haven't got the right to work in the UK, the tax penalties can be really quite eye-watering. So it's really important that you get those things right. And if you're not sure, check with your HR advisor, check with your accountant, or give Real Success a ring, and we'll advise you on whether it's likely that you've got your tax status wrong of employees. It applies to your family members as well. So we've got to be sure that we're on the right side, because that can be very, very costly. I've already mentioned it. Employment tribunals can be very costly if we've made mistakes. Most mistakes on tribunals are procedural, so we haven't followed the correct procedure. Things like a disciplinary procedure. If we don't follow a disciplinary procedure absolutely correctly, then we can potentially be at risk of unfair dismissal. So I often advise, be very careful before you start issuing warnings and things like that to your retained staff, because actually you could end up in a tribunal if you don't follow the right process. So that's something to be bearing in mind as well. And also discrimination and things like that can end up in a tribunal. So 1 second, I've pressed something I didn't mean to. There you go. And the third one, and this might sound maybe mildly flippant, but actually just the stress of getting things wrong, the stress of managing people can often be far more, people tell me, than actually managing their livestock if they're a livestock business, or managing staff to a certain degree. But actually managing all these complexities can be quite stressful. So the simple answer to that is, don't wing it. Take advice in the same way as you would take advice about finances. If you're, again, a farming business, you have vets to advise you on animal health. Don't wing your people stuff. If you're not sure, speak to a HR company, speak to people like Real Success. We'll advise you to keep you on the right side of the law, which means you can sleep at night, knowing your employment contracts are all up to date, knowing that you've got a staff handbook that covers all your policies from social media to mobile phones. You know, you need to have all these things in place, and then hopefully the stress levels will be dramatically reduced. So we've done a lot of this stuff, but how do we keep good people? How do we retain our best staff? Here's just a few ideas and thoughts, and there's lots of them. I could spend another hour just talking about how to retain people, but here's some top line ideas for you on how to retain good people in whatever business you're running. The first one to recognize is that people don't leave businesses. People leave people. They don't leave businesses. Yes, in reality, they're leaving your business. But the single biggest reason when we ask people in our recruitment division, why are you leaving your current job? The single biggest reason is poor management, or poor managers, more specifically. Just the way I was managed, the way I was spoken to is quite frequently one of the most common reasons people leave. So if that's the case, and it's poor people management, it can be poor management of our business as well. It may be poor communication. We don't know what's happening. We don't know what the plan is. But actually, poor management is the single biggest reason that people will leave a business. It's often not for more money. It's not even for career development sometimes. It's just, I need to get away from this because I don't believe it in the way the business is being managed. The second reason, or way to retain good people, is, as well as improving your management skills and go on some courses and training and learn about management skills, is the quality of the onboarding or the induction process. Some people say to me, the induction process is a day. It's here's where this is, here's where the cows are, here's where the milking parlor is, here's where the office is, here's where the tea's made. Off you go, good luck. And then within 3 to 4 months, that person hasn't worked or they've left. Recruitment doesn't finish on the day that someone arrives at your business. Recruitment continues, the recruitment process continues right through the onboarding process. So do you have a plan for the first 100 days of that person? People go, 100 days? What are we going to do for 100? That can include what they're learning about in your business, who they're spending time with, where they're going in your business, which part of the business they're going to spend time in, when you're going to have your check-ins, when you're going to sit down with them after week 1, week 3, week 6, and say, how's it going? What's working for you? What isn't working? That's very important in terms of embedding people into your organization, is having a robust induction process that's documented. We know exactly where we're going to be for the first 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks of my job here at your business. Quality onboarding process gives you a much better chance of holding on to that person down the line. Then we've got linked in with that really is this commitment to training and development. Now, people often say to me, but Paul, you tell me I should train my staff and develop them, but I do that and then they leave. So I spend all this time training them and then they leave. My question is simply this: what happens if you don't train them and they stay? Think about it. So the obvious benefit of training your people is whilst they're working with you, they feel valued, they feel empowered, they feel developed, they're more likely to stay. Now, at some point, that person may be trained so well, they're ready for career advancement. What does that say about the reputation of your business as a good employer? They will leave your business at some point, having been well trained and developed, and talk positively about your business as a good employer. Don't train people and they'll leave and say, well, I never got trained. So whilst it might be costly, and you can put agreements in place in the contracts to say that there's a certain recovery of training costs if you really wish to, I don't necessarily recommend that. I believe you should just say to the team, we're going to train and develop you at whatever pace you want. If you're interested, we'll teach you and we'll develop you. That's a fantastic way of retaining people in your business. I've already touched on this already, but retaining good people is also about having good working conditions. That from a farm, having a decent staff room somewhere warm where I can eat and drink, and with a microwave and a kettle that don't blow up every time I turn them on, to actually having a staff room in a business somewhere where I can sit and talk to people, safe working conditions where health and safety is really focused on. These are the reasons, again, why people will leave. So an investment in good protective clothing, the proper tools to do the job, all of these are things that are going to help you retain your staff. And a big factor, particularly for the generations coming through, is working hours. We cannot say and talk about the generation as woke and lazy. They don't want to work the hours. Just because we've worked, particularly if it's our own business, 60, 80, 100 hours a week, 7 days a week for 20 years, we cannot expect other people to do the same. And the generations coming through have a different perspective on work. You may even find within your family business, there's a clash between what you want to do and what your dad or your mum thinks you should be doing, or your granddad and your grandparents think you should be doing. We have to accept in agriculture in particular, and particularly if I refer to the on-farm environment, working hours of 60 to 100 hours a week, or worse still, working 10, 11, 12 days before I get a day off, is not going to bring people into our industry, and it's not going to retain people in our businesses. We are competing not only with each other, we're competing with industries outside of agriculture. And if they've got a 5-day working week, 40 hours a week, I get my weekends off, we've got to find a way in agriculture to work towards that. I have clients who have now got staff on farm, particularly working 40 hours, 5 days a week. They've got more staff, they've got more part-time staff, but they are achieving that, and people want to go and work for them, paying them less salaries, but better work-life balance. So that's another area for you to think about. How hard are you expecting people to work in your business? Particularly, how long are you expecting them to work before they get a day off? And lastly, just to mention I'm talking about Vita profiling here. So I talked a little while ago about the importance of communication. That is one of the single biggest reasons people will leave your business. It's quite simply the way you talk to them. So we spend a lot of time using our profiling system called Vita, which is exclusive to Real Success. It was designed purely for the agricultural sector. It's a very simple version. If you're familiar with psychometric tools like Insights and DISC and things like that, it's a simplified version of that, which makes it quick, easy, and simple to understand. Learning that within your team, whatever type of business you're running, everybody wants to work, receive communication, and give communication in a different way enables you, if you're the manager or the leader or the owner of the business, to adapt and flex your style to get the best out of the people working for you. So of all the things on this screen here, the single most important one of all of those is to learn how to speak to your team effectively. I wrote a book called Happy Team, Happy Farm. You can find it on Amazon. And it's all about this subject, about how we need to be able to speak effectively to the different people within our team. You may have heard the phrase, speak to other people as you wish to be spoken to. From a respect perspective, that's absolutely correct. From a style perspective, it's completely wrong. We should speak to other people in the way they wish to be spoken to from a communication style perspective. And that will make all the difference to your potential retention of staff. So as we come towards the end, I'm right on time. I want to give you 3 things to think about. So I've talked about a lot, and you can download the template of this afterwards. What are the 3 things I would suggest you take away from this? You may have taken lots of other things, but 3 specific actions you could take as a result of this lecture. The first one is check out your adverts. How are you actually writing your adverts about your business? Do you know how to do that? You can Google it, you can chat GPT if you want to, but the quality of your adverts, go and have a look at the last couple of adverts you've issued. Were they positive? Were they engaging? Did they give enough information about the role? Did they make you want to click and apply? Because that's all an advert is. A job advert in recruitment is purely about clicks or picking up the telephone. It's about getting the person to actually call us or click on the link for applying. So check out your adverts and look at other people's adverts as well. Have you got employment contracts for your staff? If you haven't, please make an attempt to get that fixed, because you are breaking the law. This idea of we can wait 6 months, 12 months before we give people a contract is wrong. We have to give people an employment contract. And also, is it up to date? If it was written more than 5 or 6 years ago, it's probably not up to date, because legislation has changed as to what's expected to be in a contract. We need to be far more specific now about working hours and working days than we were before. And the third thing is my final thing for you. If you want to know how to recruit and retain your staff, ask them. Ask your team why they joined you. Ask your team why they left their previous employment. Ask your team, what would make working in my business better for you? What do I need to improve as an employer to make my business the place you want to come to, or the place you want to stay for a long time? It's the best thing you can do, is ask the people working for you. And if you are maybe a manager watching this or an employee watching this, talk to your manager, talk to your leaders about what it is that you think that would make you stay in the business for a longer period. So I hope that makes sense. I'm exactly on where I wanted to be. In terms of what we're going to do now, I'll stop sharing my screen shortly. I'll go back to Charlie and Sarah, and we'll see if they've got any questions. If we have got questions, I'm happy to answer them. But in terms of, if you want the handout of today's session, you just send an email to contact@real-success.co.uk. I'll leave it on the screen for a couple of seconds so you can see it, and we'll send you a handout which is a simplified version summary of what I've spoken about today. Or you can check out our website, that's on the screen as well, which will tell you more about what Real Success does, or just give us a call and we'll be happy to chat to you. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that's been informative, stimulating, and giving you something to think about. And I now welcome some questions, if we've had any indeed. If we haven't, then obviously I'll hand back to Charlie. Charlie.
Thanks, Paul. Yes, I mean, the only questions on there at the moment is the one from me. Well, there's another one just arrived. My question is with regard to job adverts, and I understand, that you want people to click and follow through, but when you get a job advert that's detailed on what they're looking for, what's your view on desirable qualifications, because it's something of a bugbear of mine at the moment.
What do you mean, Charlie, by desirable conversation
Well,
qualification?
the example I'm sort of picking up on is for technicians, so people working at a vocational level for machinery dealerships. And every job advert I ever see, they never ever put on the desirable qualifications. Yet the industry's got some really good apprenticeship schemes now, but the job advert never states, level 3, level 2 in land-based engineering as a desirable. I just wonder what your thoughts were on
So yeah, it's a good
qualifications.
question, Charlie. And the challenge is when we're advertising a role, we want the maximum number of applicants. That's my start point. So the more hurdles you put into an advert for the person to get over, the less applicants you're going to get. Now, I think in reverse, if you want to attract people who've got that qualification and it's really important to you, then absolutely put it into in the advert. But it all depends on the level. So if the qualification is necessary to do the job, they've already got to be qualified to do the job, then you could put that into your advert. If you're willing to train somebody up to that level, you don't necessarily need to do that. Or you put in qualification is desirable, but full training will be given.
Yeah,
It really depends on the level of the job, Charlie, I think.
I suppose the reason I sort of pick up on it is we have an industry that does a lot of grumbling about the availability of skills and the right people. And I suppose from my perspective, I see, if you're going to advertise roles, at least put the desirable qualifications to show there's some professionalism in the industry, and you want to attract professional people to it, rather
Well, I
than
think again it comes back to the
generally
level.
the only qualifications some of them ever list is you need a clean driving license, and I just think, oh my God, that's ridiculous,
But again, I'm going to repeat what I've just said. Really, to me, it depends on the level. If that
Yeah.
qualification is important to do that job, then absolutely. If it isn't, you're in danger of overselling it. So
I think the qualifications are essential to do the job. That's
yeah,
the thing.
in that case,
And I
if
think,
they are essential to do the job, then I'd actually recommend putting them in, which is probably supportive of
yeah,
what you're saying, because it then will filter out the people that haven't got it.
because if you're recruiting people, and it tends to be the young, they recruit younger people to grow them with the company. The reality is those younger people should have those prerequisite qualifications that exist. But
If
the
it's essential for
companies,
the role. If it isn't
yeah,
essential for the role, then no, you don't have to
yeah,
put it
yeah.
in, and it's about the training on the job sometimes for some people, but if there's
I think
technical
the
qualification
industry,
required, then you should put it in, yeah.
yeah, I suppose, the industry should look in the mirror occasionally, and it wants professional people, it wants skilled people. Then it maybe needs to look in the mirror a bit, really. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
There's a few questions on there. So, Martin, do you want to ask your question? Martin Coulter,
Or I can just answer it if Martin's.
or you can just answer it. Yeah, if you can see the chat
I
poll.
can, yeah. What is your opinion on secondments within a workplace to another company? So actually, I guess again, I'd have to ask more questions before I can answer it. Really, I see. Are they in the same industry? Why would you want to do that? What's the benefit of doing so? What would be the benefit of somebody going working? Would you want them to work for a competitor? Possibly not. So I think I'd need to know more, Martin, what you mean by that in another company. I think sometimes broadening our experience can be really helpful. So working in different parts of the industry, if that's what you're talking about, can be really helpful. I often used to talk about sometimes if you're working in sales, it's good to work in buying for a while to find out what the other side of here's Martin, he's coming through. Here he is. Am I getting your question, Martin? Is it that broadness of just unmute yourself for a second? Is it the broadness of widening your experience that you were asking about? Yeah, so it's about broadening our experience in the industry. If you can partner with another company that's not competing perhaps with you, and I don't know, you're working for a particular type of consultancy business and you want to get some experience elsewhere, you could offer to do a swap, offer a secondment opportunity for graduates in particular. That can work. I wouldn't say it would necessarily work for competitors. You might not want to do that because you might lose them. But yes, I think that's an interesting concept, Martin, for people to broaden their experience. Do you think UK agriculture needs to have an emphasis on diversity and inclusion? Yeah, I did a survey for UK foundation industries on this subject. Wow, crikey, we could be here for another hour. talking about that, Mike. I think it's a very good question. I'm working with Farmers Weekly at the moment on their Lead the Field campaign around diversity, particularly around neurodiversity. And I think we are missing a trick massively in this industry, particularly around the neurodiversity angles. You know, people who are often on the autistic spectrum or even ADHD, they bring qualities that I think our industry needs, be that creativity or attention to detail. And then in terms of equality and diversity, we've got a major issue, particularly in the ag sector, around gender equality, sexuality issues. I absolutely think you're right, Mike. It's quite a big issue that the industry needs to deal with, because we are excluding ourselves from wide bunches of people that could potentially work in our industry because we're not welcoming them in. And there's a lot of activity, I think, now being done on that. Georgia said, as an employee, do you recommend having regular interviews once every 1 or 2 years as a form of training and keeping up with personal development? Thank you. So going for regular interviews, that's a good question, Georgia. There's no harm in going for interviews. Yeah, it improves your confidence and your skill potentially in going for interviews. I think it can be unsettling though, if you're thinking of looking for a new job every 2 years. Certainly as recruiters, if someone's moving jobs every 12 months to 2 years, that tends to be a negative rather than a positive. We're looking for people who are likely to stay. But if your question is about getting interview practice, then there's no harm in doing that. And going, if you're at university or college, I think we should be training people how to do interviews. I'm sure they are. But yeah, possibly doing that as part of your training in terms of how to interview effectively, if that's what you mean, then absolutely. Any further questions or any responses to that for you, Charlie?
I don't think so. The ED&I one is always an interesting one. There's a lot. I think engineering in general, there's often a lot of meetings between the engineering institutions and the engineering bodies about ED&I. I think, you know, we have a bit of a double whammy really, because we've got engineering and we've got agriculture. And the ED&I record on both isn't particularly great. I think the gender is pretty good in agriculture. I think the ethnicity and some of the other sides of it are not so clever.
Yeah, and I think it depends on the sector of agriculture as well, Charlie, because the on-farm sector is still gender unbalanced. Far more females working in the industry, but so many farms don't even have a working toilet. You know, so we've got.
It's
a lot
interesting
of work to do on that.
you know, I was at an event and there was a lady there who was a veterinary surgeon, and she says it is nigh on impossible to get men to work in veterinary. They're inundated with women, and men don't do it.
It's weird, isn't it? It's completely the opposite way around. Yeah, because I do a lot of work with veterinary practices as well, and you're quite right. I would say it's probably 80% at the moment.
Yeah.
Females. Some of the leadership is males, but the a lot of females in veterinary. Okay.
Charlie, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Donald Trump has decided that DEI is not a preferred way for businesses to go, especially American businesses. So he's going to be trying to make companies do the opposite of what you've just said. I totally agree with what you said. I'm just wondering how Europe responds, because last week he got the American embassy in Paris to send out a dictative to all the American companies in Europe to remove DEI. I don't know what you feel or how we go forward on that.
Just very briefly, what was your name? Sorry.
Declan.
Yeah. Sorry, Declan. Very good question. One that we can't get into at length in a session like this about Mr. Trump's policies. What I do think is that we're not America. We are the UK. We've made a lot of progress on this area as businesses, and I believe that will continue. I don't think this government is certainly going to turn around and say we agree with Donald Trump. I don't think many governments in the world are going to turn around and say they agree with Donald Trump. So, and actually what it does in a sense, Declan, is it brings it to the fore. When someone says we're going to stop doing something, often what happens is it galvanizes people to be more proactive with it. So I think in many of the things that Mr. Trump is doing, he's going to have the reverse effect for what he was hoping for, whether it's tariffs or diversity and inclusion. It actually will raise up the issue to be discussed even more. So I'm confident, Declan, that businesses will continue the route we've been going down.
I really hope so. Thank you.
Okay, I don't think there's any more questions. So yeah, so thank you, Paul, for giving us an excellent presentation and taking your time out to do that for us today. It's really appreciated.
Pleasure. Thank you.
Lots of good advice there for employers and employees, and I'm sure it'll get watched a number of times after today. So thanks for doing that. I'd like to thank everybody for joining us, and I hope you join us for our next lecture, which is on the 13th of May. And we're going to be joined by some representatives from Howden's Insurance Group, who are going to be talking about climate change, risk assessments, and professional indemnity. So all that's left to say is thanks again, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.